incredibly illustrious career. We are so fortunate that's up there has lent his expertise, his experience, all of his knowledge. I don't know if any of you know this, but up there has also provided some pro bono work and has been a longtime supporter to SEWA programming and our client base. So we really appreciate his longtime support and appreciate him coming here to speak with all of you today on a lovely Saturday. So thank you, Sapir.
I also want to add that there are some seniors here that may also have some questions for you, like life and issues, and also the role the state plays when we are hospitalized or have tubes in them. And then also some of them have properties back in India and how to deal with that. And they may have some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with music.
I know, I like that song that you put in. Very nice song.
बाबूजी धीरे चलना प्यार भी मेरा बड़ी धोखी है इतना बाबूजी धीरे चलना.
All right, let's start today's chai and chat. For those of you who are joining us online, you are missing some wonderful chai and some wonderful chat. And there's some gulab jamun I see in the back. And samosas are coming. So the photo you see in front of you holds true. We hope you'll be able to join us next time in person, but we welcome you for joining this recording. My name is Satvir Chaudhary, and I am providing one of the chai and chat talks that SEWA-AIFW provides on a monthly basis on various issues affecting South Asians, particularly in Minnesota. Today, we are going to be talking about common issues affecting H-1 and H-4 visa holders. I want to make sure that we know that I'm not going to be giving a how-to on getting an H-1B visa, how to get a H-4 visa. Many of us already know this, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there's any confusion. But the reason we're talking about this is because so many South Asians are in the United States on H-1 and H-4 visas. Certainly not the only immigration status that South Asians in America hold, but H-1 and H-4 visas are quite common. It's quite very much the gateway for so many South Asians to come to the United States, who may eventually gain permanent status as well as citizenship. But there are also particular issues that affect H-1 and H-4 visa holders in particular. This back when I started this presentation, maybe 10 or more years ago, I really, the title of it was Common Issues Affecting H-4 Visa Holders, because so many South Asian women were here on H-4 visas, but that really has changed. Even in the last decade, it wasn't the case back then either, but really the gender parity that has come with the H-4 visas, H-1 visas has changed the landscape such that I have to change the title of my talk because so many women are on H-1B visas as much as they are H-4s, and the common issues that affect them are similar and the same, and I'll talk about all of those. And if there are questions that arise, I'm happy to answer those as well. So what I want to talk about, more than just this is how to get an H-1 visa, are the issues that surround these visas. And this is important. And it's important because many people come here on a H-1 visa sponsored by their company. Or they come on an H-4 visa sponsored, so to speak, by their spouse. And a lot of times these visas are handled by someone else. And so when issues come up affecting one's visa, we are too often dependent or really unknowledgeable about what one's rights are, what issues affect those visas, because we never handled them in the first place, whether man or a woman. A lot of these issues that I'm talking about today can be useful to men as much as women. So I want to first, so my goal is to, in this Chian Chat, is to provide some education on what context we are in as these H-1 holders. What is our role or context in America? And all of the things that affect people who are coming here, particularly for the first time, who live in a different country, don't understand the system, don't understand the culture. Many times we don't understand the language, but language is just one barrier. So I wanted to first make sure we understand, have maybe not totally, but have some concept of what the American legal system is. And then I want to talk about immigration a bit, immigration issues. But then I want to venture far beyond immigration issues. I want to discuss the family issues that occur, potential criminal issues that occur. Many people don't feel like these things can affect them or will ever affect them, and hopefully they never will. But my role as a lawyer, I encounter many people who are encountering this for the first time and are sometimes in shock that things could happen to them. And because this is life, whether we're in South Asia or America, things happen in life. And the more we are aware of these things that could happen, the better off we will be. And then there are other things like civil issues that occur for everyone, whether you are an immigrant or not. We'll learn about those too. So let me just start by talking about describing what the American government system is. Many people here already know what this is. Some people may not. And so this is an opportunity for us to all get on the same page. So let's just review. The American government has a system of 3 branches. It is a legislative branch, executive branch, and a judicial branch. I think it's important to know this because people coming from South Asia in particular are used to a parliamentary system. In a parliamentary system, there's no separate legislative and executive branch. The legislative branch and the executive branch are the same. So the prime minister is someone who was elected to parliament. So they are not only the executive, but they are also they also make the laws. In America, it's different. We have 3 branches, not just 2. We have a branch that makes the law, and we have a branch the legislative branch. We have a branch that enforces the law, executive, that executes the law. And then we have a branch that interprets the law. What happens when there are disputes in interpreting the law? And that is the courts. Now, and I really want to keep it as simple as that. We don't need to get much more detailed than that. particularly in this context. I'm happy to answer more questions. I'm an expert at especially the legislative branch, but it's important to know that there are three branches. And all three branches help make the law in some way, shape, or form. So, and it can be confusing. Well, the Congress or the Minnesota legislature made a law. Okay, well then how did the governor or the president, how did they make an executive order? Is that a law? Well, then the court issued an order and we have to follow that. Is that a law? So it can be very confusing, but it's important to know that all three interact with each other to help make the law. And that's what makes it sometimes complicated, especially in immigration, because sometimes there's a law that you can look up in a book, but sometimes the executive or the president makes the law that you have to look up somewhere else. And sometimes a court makes the law, which you also have to look up somewhere else too. And so you can imagine all this complexity makes for a wonderful job opportunity for lawyers like me. But be that as it may, that's the system we have. There was, but let me just say one thing in our defense. There was, William Shakespeare had a play where one of the famous lines in his play was, "The first thing we do, we kill all the lawyers." Well, that was a person who wanted to create a dictatorship, and the first thing that a dictator wants to do to secure their dictatorship is to kill all the lawyers, because we don't have any. Then there will be no one to argue with that person. So sometimes arguing and hiring a lawyer and these court systems is confusing and slow and complicated, but that is also the choice we make in the alternative to having a dictator or a king who simply makes all the rules and we do whatever the king says, and there's no predictability. We cannot do anything. Whatever that person decides is what goes. So that is our system. Let me just to talk a little bit about the court system, because the court system is important to people coming to America for the first time. If you are from South Asia, the court system is somewhat similar. Suffice it to know, there is a lower court that takes all the facts and they make a decision or a judgment, but you can appeal that judgment of a lower court, and if you can also appeal that judgment all the way up to the Supreme Court. So very similar to India, Pakistan, other South Asian countries. So in that sense, it is somewhat similar, but we have to understand that there is a court system here. Now, one difference I would say is that although the court system here can still be complicated, I would, because I have some exposure to the court system in India, in a good way, not a bad way, that the American court system is more accessible. I will venture to say that. I would say that it is more streamlined. It is a bit more comprehensible. It does move faster. And so I would say that it is friendlier to the citizens here, and residents here, than other places around the world. And by the way, whether you are an H-1 holder, H-4 holder, or a United States citizen, you have 99% of the same rights in the United States, whether it be civil, whether it be in a criminal context. or constitutional context. Non-citizens and citizens alike have just about exactly the same amount of rights. In some cases, non-citizens may even have more rights. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So it's important to know in our court system, the same rights are there. Now, when it comes to immigration, by the way, immigration is not part of our court system. It's a different system. There are some fewer rights, but in general, non-citizens have the same rights as U.S. citizens. Fundamental rights. When I say rights, I mean fundamental rights. There are some areas where there are not the same rights. I will talk about some of them in a bit. So how are immigration laws made? Well, take a look at this chart. This is not going to help your understanding of how immigration laws are made, except to know that the way immigration laws are made is very complicated. That's, for today's purpose, that's really just all you need to know. I mean, ultimately, the Congress makes immigration laws. They make the laws, but the president issues executive orders. Of course, we know one of the biggest executive orders affecting immigration was DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, instituted by President Obama. That was a huge impact on undocumented people in the U.S., but it was not a law by Congress. But the enforcement of immigration laws in this context is very much in the hands of the executive branch, the president. We know the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, the embassy. We know the Department of Labor for H-1 holders. We know, so those departments are executive branch. They hold most of the cards in the immigration context. That is not to say that that courts are not involved. There are a lot of immigration decisions made by the courts, and we have to make sure that we are aware of those. The immigration is very complex because there are different courts. We have our normal court system that makes immigration laws, but there's a whole executive court system for immigration. Our immigration court, the court that deports people, that's not even a real court. That is a office under the Department of Justice, the Attorney General of the United States. Now they wear robes. There's a courtroom, but they are part of the executive branch. That's how much power the immigration has in the hands of the president. And then there's so many rules, minor rules that can be tweaked by other branches, and that's why I had there the field adjudicator manual. And then there are special tribunals such as the Bureau of Appeals on labor condition applications, BALCA. There is the Bureau of Immigration Appeals, the Board of Immigration Appeals. These are under the executive branch. And many of these can ultimately go to a real court, but they get stuck in these areas. So we don't have to memorize any of this. We just need to know that when we're trying to understand an immigration rule, an immigration process, and we go on to a Facebook page devoted to H-1B visa holders, or we go on a listserv where we ask strangers' opinions online. What do they think of this? What do they think of that? Well, someone might or might not be relaying their own experience, but that does not mean they are following the law. And you know, you'll hear me say this time and time again when you are, when people are rely on online discussions for legal information, you're really taking your own, you're really taking your own immigration future. It really is in your own hands and no one else's. It is a way to make oneself feel good, but it is not a reliable source of information ever. Even if something happens, you get information online that happens to be right. Look at all of the places where areas of government where there could be a different decision on the rule. There could be a field adjudicator manual comment on how to handle a process differently. There could be a court decision and a recent court decision that someone online doesn't know or hasn't heard of, that, and you take a particular action on your immigration status that doesn't follow a recent ruling. You're really putting yourself at jeopardy. So important points about our court system: obviously confusing. Another point about our court system I want people to know: it is an advocacy system. So when we go to court, it is one group against another, or one person against another. There is no court that's where you can go and say, here, please just decide for me what I should do. Many people may have encountered our court system where they call a court and they say, what should I do in this situation? And the person on the phone says, I can't give you legal advice. That is not our system. That is made up of. It is an advocacy system where one has to go against another. In a criminal sense, it is, the state of Minnesota, for example, will make a criminal charge against so-and-so. In a civil sense, it will be, so-and-so is suing someone else for some money. But there's nowhere, only when there is an adversarial or adversarial process set up does the court then come in and make a judgment. It does not do that until there is that kind of dual tension that has been created. Now you can go for advice to other places, but you cannot go to court and simply say, what do you think? That's the point I want to make. This is particularly true when it comes to the police. I want to make sure people know, and as someone who has defended criminal charges for many people, particularly South Asians, that when the police may have written a ticket or they've charged a crime, people want to go to the police and say, can I just explain my situation? Or I want to just go to court and explain my situation, and they will reach a different conclusion. That is 9 times out of 10 the sure way to ensure a conviction or a problem, because of, again, the advocacy system. Once an arrest has been made, or once even an investigation, but certainly once a charge has been made, the advocacy system has been invoked, and the police or the prosecutor, or maybe some other civil matter, they are no longer on your side. They have been charged. That is their job, is to convict you, nothing else. And so, particularly for non-citizens, I can just tell you, certainly when a criminal charge has been made, I just think it was, I don't know how else to say it, but it's the dumbest thing in the world for a non-citizen who has been charged with a crime not to hire a lawyer. Now, look, income is an issue. We also have what are called public defenders. If someone does not meet a income threshold, then a lawyer will be assigned to that person. But you have to have a lawyer, and no amount of explaining will help. Usually, particularly with non-citizens, trying to explain one situation makes things worse, because people don't know the system, because non-citizens may have English as a second language. The terms of art can be misinterpreted, and it has happened so many times where I've defended people, and even some misunderstandings, legitimate misunderstandings, happen because of the language barrier. We say things differently, but they have done at least done the right thing and hired a lawyer to go things and clear things up without making things worse. So you'll hear me harp on this a lot. Please do not do a thing without a lawyer certainly when someone is charged with a crime. Okay, so other important points about our court system: immigration, workplace issues. Those are generally federal court. Not always, but in general. There's a whole, remember I had the graph about the trial court, appeals court, Supreme Court. There is a track for that court system on a federal level, and there's a track for the same type of system on the state level. So there are two different courts. In Minnesota, there is the state courts. We have a trial court. We have a court of appeals. We have a Minnesota Supreme Court. And then we also have a federal court where there are larger crimes, larger issues, certainly immigration, where there's a U.S. district court. That's like the trial court for the federal government. Then there is a court of appeals, U.S. Court of Appeals. Then there's the U.S. Supreme Court, and different issues can go to different courts. Even if you're suing someone for an amount of money, sometimes that can be in federal court if it's a lot of money, but it can also be in a state court. Let's see. Okay, then the administrative issues. There are administrative issues like driver's license. A driver's license, I think most of us know here, but just to make sure we're on the same page, that is an administrative issue. It's done by the executive branch. We don't go to a court for a driver's license. We go to an office where there's a bureaucracy. We apply for the licensing. However, if there is a violation of the driver's license, for example, that will most often be then go into the court system, the state court system. So a speeding ticket is just a small type of crime. And if you challenge, you are entitled, you have the right to challenge a speeding ticket. You would then go to a state court, and that happens, and there's nothing wrong with that. By the way, even a parking ticket although it's not technically a crime, once you get it, you have the right to challenge it in state court. When I was in law school, I got a parking ticket in downtown Minneapolis, and let me just tell you what happened. I was parked in a loading zone, but it was temporary. I went to run into the office, into the building. My friend was sitting in the driver's seat, and the parking police came and blocked him in, not allowing him to leave, even though it was a temporary loading zone. If he had just said, okay, move on, would have moved on. So I actually took the parking ticket to trial in state court. And that was I lost, but it was an interesting demonstration that, look, we all have rights, and there's a There's a place in our system for most everything that happens. Okay, so let's just touch on the immigration issues. Let's just make sure we know what is an H-1B visa. We hear a lot about H-1B visas. There's a lot of discussion, but sometimes we forget the simplicity of what an H-1B visa is. It's very simple. An H-1B visa is a visa that allows someone in for temporary work for a job that requires a bachelor's degree or more to do that job. That's it. That's simply what an H-1B visa is. Now, there are complexities that go with all of those things. Temporary becomes a big discussion. The job becomes a big discussion. You know, what is the bachelor's degree? You know, the specialty occupation, the company that has this job. All of these things become discussion points in the application for the H-1B visa, but it's important for us to know that this is what it simply is. It's a temporary work visa for a job that requires a bachelor's or more. Okay, so what is an H-4 visa? H-4 visa used to be very simple. It was just if you were married, if an H-1B visa holder was married, their spouse and children could come with on what is called an H-4 as a dependent. It used to be that simple, but now it's a little more interesting having an H-4 visa because there's been some changes to the law in the last 10 years that allow an H-4 visa holder in certain situations to work. And that is only when the H-1B visa spouse has an approved I-140. And in fact, it doesn't even actually have to be officially approved. It can be done before then. But in general, there's now a circumstance where an H-4 visa holder can have an EAD. An EAD allows someone to work, and there are no specifications. So while you have a H-1B visa holder who is required where the requirement is only temporary work, and they have to have a bachelor's degree, and there's some more things too, prevailing wage and all of that. Suddenly, the spouse who has a H-4 visa, H-4 and an EAD has none of those parameters. So an H-4 spouse they could go and do some work on the side for work at Starbucks, but that H-4 actually may be for example, an IT professional themselves, and they can go and get any job they want. Without all of the really the complexities of getting an H-1 visa. So that has made things very interesting. I think it is a benefit, it's a good thing, but H-4 used to be very uncomplicated. Now it's not. Now it is, there are complexities with it, good complexities, but it's just an interesting development. Okay, at the bottom here, I have my the address to my blog, immigrationqa.com, where I explain in more detail what an H-1B visa is. Immigrationqa.com. I think SEWA was going to just put that link in. When they post it on YouTube, they were going to put that link there too. But there's a more detailed explanation of what an H-1B visa requires. The requirements are complicated, but the definition itself is not. Okay, so what are some, besides immigration issues, what are some immigrant issues? This is what I really like to talk to SEWA about, because yes, most people who are on H1 or H4, the company attorney has handled it for the most part, but there are all sorts of issues that come with being an H1 or an H4 visa holder just by virtue of living in the country. I mentioned that the immigration laws are made by the federal government, Congress, court, or the president and the executive branch. But states do pass laws, and they try to, and they do pass laws that affect non-citizens that people should know about and affect them. Now, many people who are in this situation already know, but let's go through some of them. Maybe you know some of them, maybe maybe you don't. Status checks. The driver's license. Many states have enacted, because the states are in charge of their own driver's licenses, they've enacted a system where a non-citizen, particularly someone here on temporarily, has a designation on their driver's license that they are here temporarily. And in Minnesota, up until this past month, this changed only last month in Minnesota, there was a stripe, a bar across the top of the driver's license that said status check. So if you were pulled over for a speeding ticket, the police officer would see that status check, and if they wanted to, they could see if you were here legally. So that affects us. Minnesota did away with that. Now, actually, I need to double check. Now, we allowed driver's licenses for all. I don't know if we did away with the status check. I think so. I think we did. We'll double check that. But many states have that. I think most states do now too. Okay, so I have something on there, the AR-11. This is something we have to make. And I have this with driver's licenses. Many people move to different places, especially on H1s, but not necessarily. They move to a different apartment. They'll change apartments. You know, they were here on an H1. They were single. They had a 1-bedroom. They got married. Now their spouse, they need a 2-bedroom, or they have kids. So they moved to a different apartment in the same building or somewhere else, or maybe they buy a house. It's always important to update the government on your address. There is no such thing as a permanent address that for a H1 or H4 visa holder. Someone who has a non-immigrant status, this applies for any visa. There's no such thing as where, well, I will just use this as my address. I've had some people give their company address as their H1. That is a no-no. It is no big deal. No big deal to go online and simply report your change of address. The AR-11 form is online. You attach your visa number, receipt number to the particular form. You note it, old address, new address, reported. Now, be careful, because moving when you have an H-1B visa can have other implications, because your H-1 was based on where you are working. And if you move, that may invoke a different job location. It may invoke a different metropolitan statistical area. For those of you who know the prevailing wage, which might invoke a different wage and might need an amendment. But aside from all those issues, people need to be reporting their change of addresses, and they need to change their driver's license too. That's a state law. I come across lots of people. They've lived in Minnesota for X number of years, but they still have their Ohio driver's license. That needs to be changed. The law says that within 30 days, you have to change your driver's license. That is the case in most states. Discrimination, hostile workplace. this applies to whether you have an H-1B visa, H-4 or not. There are laws against discrimination. There are laws against hostile workplace, and discrimination comes in so many different forms, and they're clever. The discrimination comes in clever ways. No one ever says, I'm not hiring you because you're South Asian. Or we're firing you just because we can't handle another South Asian in the group. No one says that. What they do is they do things like they pile on your workload so that you quit, that you want to quit, or they exclude you from essential meetings. In essence, they create a hostile workplace. So discrimination occurs. Everyone has the right not to be discriminated against, and there are particular laws. There are particular laws regarding discrimination when it comes to H-1B visa holders. A company, an employer is prohibited from leveraging your immigration status, from back charging legal fees, from designating you for a particular job just because of your immigration status. There is a carved out section just for non-citizens. This is where I mentioned that sometimes non-citizens have extra rights. Well, there's a whole section where that prohibits discrimination based on non-visa immigrant status. And by the way, the complaint system for that is much easier than it is for citizens. The wage and hour division, once you file a complaint, and I want to make sure people use this very carefully. This is not to be abused, because ease of process sometimes gets abused. But if it is truly occurring, and I suggest talking to a lawyer to make sure it's wise to do so, but you can file a wage and hour division complaint, and they are very responsive. Very responsive. Now you can get in trouble for saying something false. So that's why I say be very, very careful. Okay, immigrant issues, language, of course. Big issue. Where's language an issue? I talked about interaction with the government, the police. A lot of times it's very important to say nothing, or simply say, I want to talk to a lawyer, or I want an interpreter. Those things are, if you are nervous, a lot of times we are, when we are nervous, we want to fill the space with words, or we want to explain, but sometimes that's a bad thing. Maybe because saying something is against your interest, maybe because we don't know how to explain things properly. Whenever a police, I'll tell you this, if I get pulled over by a police officer, my emotions get heightened. The blood rushes to my forehead. It's not just, I'm not afraid of them, it's just the authority. And I think that perhaps, if I might venture a generalization within the South Asian community, there is a higher, or maybe a stricter regard for authority, that once they are invoked, well, they must be right, or I must be in trouble. And so then we try to, and we may not be, but we try to explain, and we make things worse. So it is not harmful to simply say, when one is nervous with the authorities, I would like an interpreter, or I would like a translator, please. Now, for a speeding ticket, it's not going to be the end of the world if you admit to speeding when you weren't accidentally because of language barriers, and then you get a ticket. But there are more serious situations where that can occur. Here's something that I wanted to, it's one of my pet issues for South Asians in particular. It's this next item called cabin fever. In Minnesota, in the US, when people have a second home, vacation home, a lot of times it's on a on a nice lake or in the woods, we call it our cabin. In Canada, they call it a cottage. It's like a vacation home. But cabin fever refers to something that happens in particular in Minnesota and other northern states when we get a lot of snow. And as a result of getting a lot of snow, we stay inside a lot more. When we stay inside a lot more, we are less exposed to light. And what realistically actually occurs physically, biologically, and this is recognized by medicine, is a vitamin D deficiency. This is also called seasonal affected syndrome, SAD, but in Minnesota, we call it cabin fever. Now, we have, South Asians, we have darker skin. The darker skin is to protect us against the light. So at times, the times when we need more light, the melanin is actually impedes us. So South Asians are more prone to seasonal affected disorder or cabin fever than other people because we absorb light less. But I mean, we're absorbed light less for a reason, because South Asia is very, very sunny, trying to protect us. But here we need more light. And now this affects a lot of everyone. Cabin fever, vitamin D deficiency affects everyone in Minnesota, but us in particular. And so it's very important, particularly during the winter months when we are inside, to take vitamin D supplements. And sometimes, like I have actually have a light bar that gets that vitamin D, that gets that light. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is because H4 dependents in particular, particularly the H4s who have never been to America before. They may be newly married. They have their apartment. They live in the apartment complex in Eden Prairie. There may be a few people in their apartment complex to interact with, but in general, they get holed up, particularly for the winter. It's difficult to go out. What newcomer from India to Minnesota wants to go walking in 20 below weather, even if it's sunny? I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult for me too. I don't like that. So H4 dependents are particularly vulnerable to cabin fever or vitamin D deficiency. And what does that do? I'll let some of our other doctors perhaps explain all the effects of vitamin D disorder, but it is emotional and we act out. I cannot tell you how many times I have represented an H4 dependent on shoplifting charges. And I'm going to tell you that it is almost exclusively, the shoplifting charges that I represent are almost exclusively H4 dependents, wives. It's incredible. I mean, there was a point in time where, okay, I'll represent you, great, I'll defend you, all this, but then there's really a pattern occurred. And I can only, these are people who don't lack money. And they didn't steal anything of consequence. It was just like a hair scrunchie. They bought everything else, spent $100, whatever more, and then slipped a hair scrunchie in their pocket. And by the way, there's a point in time where it's no longer, I can tell it's no longer an accident. Something else is going on. And I attribute it to seasonal affective disorder, where people are cooped up. There is a desire to act out in some way where this types of things happen. I'm not telling everyone's going to start shoplifting, but I'm just giving you I'm just giving you an example that this is how it really can manifest itself, and it affects moods. It affects the relationship. I've told someone is usually the husband comes to me and says, "Oh, my wife was charged with shoplifting." And I said, "Okay, we handled it. Fine." But then we have a conversation at the end of the case. I said, "Look, this is hard on our dependents to be cooped up in an apartment, especially to be, first of all, in a different country, and then more importantly, in a cold climate. It affects it. And by the way, we can all relate. After COVID, we can relate to the isolation. Every one of us can relate to the isolation that occurred during COVID, and we should be able to relate to the H4 dependents. A lot of them don't have their driver's license yet. And if there was an issue that translates to not just dependent visas, but also senior citizens, this would be the one. Where seniors, they're not here as a dependent, but maybe they were sponsored by their kids, and they have full permanent residency, but the driving license isn't there. The knowledge of the culture, the age group to interact with. It's not, you can be a H4 dependent and find all sorts of girlfriends and guy buddies and their kids to have your, play dates at your apartment complex in Eden Prairie. But what about the senior citizen? Where do they do? What do they do? Yes. Yeah. And you should know that this is what an amazing, unbelievable thing that SEWA is doing by creating all of these senior events and providing rides. And you're really providing an outlet we can, the senior citizens can talk for themselves on the benefit that this is provided. Okay. The child jurisdiction. Certainly for people who are on temporary visas, have children, whether the children are H4s or they maybe have been born here, the jurisdiction is an issue. I mean, there is a cultural thing where, okay, we're Indian, but when you come here, the child, the state has an interest in the well-being of the child. That is the law. That's not a value. Well, it's a value, but it is also the law. And so there are a lot of people that are surprised when certain ways of interacting with one's children in one culture is not supported in another. So that we have to be really careful where I've represented and I have consulted on cases where there was spanking, and suddenly the couple finds themselves without their child and in court. Sometimes there is no spanking. There's no problem, but we have teenagers are teenagers, and they like to talk, and sometimes they like to act out and create problems, and so they tell their friend, "Oh, my mom was so mean to me. She did this, and this," and suddenly they are separated from their parents, and there's a criminal charge. I don't know, these are issues that we need to be aware of. Whether there's things we can do about these things, there's sometimes not. But it's just important to know that there's a different system on how we approach children in the U.S. Whether good or for good or bad it is different, and we need to be wary of it. Oh, there's a little picture that came up. All right, enjoy that picture. And next issue. Family issues. That child jurisdiction is a good segue into family issues that come up with non-citizens. I'm going to just say some quick things about these, not details, but estate planning is is important for anyone. The important thing to know is that an estate plan, a will, power of attorney, healthcare directive that one might have in India is not valid here. A will, healthcare directive, power of attorney that you have here is not valid in India.
Yep.
So it is very important for everyone to have a will, whether you're single or have children or not. In fact, single people, they're even more important because there are no heirs when you're single. And this is not just about property. It's not just, it might be, some of it is about your children, who will take care of your children. I'll give you a story. I had some clients who did a will and a power of attorney. And, one of the questions is, what's going to happen to let's say both parents died in a car crash. Who will take care of the children? And so we were working this out, and they said, well, I want my brother in Hyderabad to take care of my children. Okay, your children were born in the US and they're in high school, in an American high school. Is your brother's not going to be allowed to move to the US just because of this. So you're going to take them out of the only culture that they've known, and now they're suddenly going to finish the last 2 years of high school in India. But culturally, we don't want to offend our family members that we don't value them enough to take care of our children. So this is I don't know, this actually just occurred to me, where the Indian system, South Asian culture could benefit from the godparent system that they have in America, where there's a godparent where you offer that respect, but in your actual will, you could actually provide what, the actual practicality of it. So power, and by the way, this is the case for every state in the United States. If you have a power of attorney, a will in Minnesota, and you have a property in Arizona, or you happen to move to California or somewhere, you need to get certainly a new power of attorney. Okay, here's another example of, these are just tragic situations where I remember someone called me, and the H-1B holder, he died in a swimming pool accident, and the H-4 dependent called him, what can we do? The H-1, the spouse, had all of the bank accounts. They were all under his name. He did all of the finances. And most importantly, once the marriage ended by virtue of the spouse dying, she was no longer had a valid status in America. So aside from the terrible heartbreak of one's spouse dying, you then have to depart the country, and you have no access to the bank accounts because there was no power of attorney, healthcare directive, or will. And what do the children do? They're in high school. They may have been born in the US, but the mother doesn't have status. Okay, there are sometimes an emergency immigration status, humanitarian, that you can apply for, but most of the time they have to leave, and the kids have to go with. So these are very important considerations for the family. Estate planning, it can't be overemphasized for non-citizens. And you can do it simply. I suggest getting a lawyer, but to do it properly. But look, at the very least, get some form online and write something down. At least do that much. It may or may not work. It'll work if you have a lawyer do it for you, but do something. Okay, taxes, foreign bank holdings. Many of us already know H-1B, H-4 holders know that there's the foreign taxes. They have to be, income has to be reported at a certain level. I'm not going to go into much detail on the amounts, but if you have stuff overseas, if you have money overseas at a certain amount, that has to be reported on your income taxes here in the United States. And and as a result, I suggest not doing your tax returns with TurboTax, but have an actual certified public accountant do it. Not an accountant, a certified public accountant, CPA. They are licensed and they are like the lawyers of accounting, CPAs. Accountants are not. CPAs are licensed. They have much more accountability. They know how to do this stuff. They need to be. They are up on the law. Have a CPA do your tax returns if you have any income, savings, real estate holdings out of the country. Family issues, divorce often comes up. An H-4 is a dependent. Their status in the United States depends on being married to the H-1B visa holder. What happens when you're divorced? The answer is they no longer have status in the US. Either they have to find another status or they have to depart. It's that simple. It's very difficult. It's a shock, but it is that simple. So if that occurs, the H-4 really needs to engage a good immigration attorney. SEWA has been very helpful in advocating as well to explore any other options. Sometimes that H-4 EAD holder, especially if they're an IT professional, they may have an H-1 option of their own. Sometimes there was domestic violence involved in divorce. They might have a U visa option or a VAWA option, but the options have got to be explored. What happens to the Indian assets? When I did practiced family law and did divorces with non-citizens, we had real difficulties when the couple owned property abroad. And a divorce, the divorce will be granted in Minnesota. The question is, how are the property and how are the assets and the debts and and sometimes child custody resolved? And it's a big problem when there are out of country assets involved. And there is one case where I was involved, and the court ruled against my suggestion, and they are still arguing over the assets today. I'm no longer the attorney anymore, but I still get, somehow they still send me notices. There's a decade later. In fact, several months ago, I ran into the judge in a different matter, and I chided him. I said, Your Honor, may I approach? I wanted to mention that that case that you had us on, and he remembered, where we argued about subject matter jurisdiction, which you don't have to worry about now. And I said, I just wanted to make sure you knew that you've ruled against me, and they're still arguing over that today. And he had a good chuckle over that. So assets are very, you have to be mindful of those. Of course, children, what happens, let's just say that the H-4 dependent is divorced and there are children involved. Depending on who gets custody, the children stay in the United States or not. This is complex. This is a complex issue. So I don't want to get into a lot of details in it, but these are the things that can occur and to be mindful of. Okay, potential immigration, criminal issues. I'm just going to go through some of these. I gave you my lecture on getting a lawyer. I mean, really, and it would be better if you get a criminal defense lawyer who understands immigration, the impacts of immigration. But you must get an attorney to represent you. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. And look, I'm speaking against my own interests here, because when the case gets screwed up and then the case comes to me, I make more money. So, what I handle all sorts of cases where the case was resolved improperly. There were immigration issues. They went and pled guilty to a deportable crime without an attorney, or they had an attorney that didn't understand immigration, and they pled guilty to a deportable crime. Oh, I'm being deported. Okay, well, this is a complex issue now. So now not only are we avoiding deportation, but we're trying to undo that plea. And that's complicated. It's possible. It is possible. And I specialize in this, but it's complicated and it's expensive. Get a lawyer in the first place. Here's what I tell some people about non-citizens about hiring a lawyer. Look, lawyers do cost money. If you're low income in criminal cases, a lawyer is provided for you. But if you're in between, you're having a hard time, or you just not sure if you should hire a lawyer. Here's one way I say it. These are especially H-1B holders. What is the value to you? What is the monetary value to you of staying in the United States? Okay, look, we're talking about monetary value, about hiring a lawyer. Okay, let's talk about monetary value. What is the monetary value of staying in the United States? Typical IT professional, they're making, at the beginning, they're probably making 60, 70,000 on the low end. And they are 25 years old, let's just say 25 years old. And they're going to be working, they intend to work in the United States until they're 65, 40 years. So let's calculate. Let's just say their income stays the same, which it won't. It's going to go up. 70,000 times 40 years. Yeah, exactly right. $2.8 million. All right. That's if your income stayed the same. But this is going to go up pretty quick. So we're talking about millions of dollars in potential income alone. Let's forget about your quality of life, all that. What is the monetary value of hiring a lawyer versus your income potential in the United States, preserving your income potential in the United States? Is it worth having a lawyer to defend you against an a criminal charge? Is it worth hiring a lawyer to do your immigration application properly? Is it worth hiring a lawyer just to sit down and talk about all of the potential issues that could come up? Well worth it. In my opinion, I am speaking in my own interest, I admit, but I'm also speaking in yours. I'm speaking in both of our interests. Okay, so most common crimes that I see charged amongst H-1B visa holders, DWIs, domestic violence, and shoplifting. I mentioned those before. Those are the most common. I see others too, but those are the most common. Impact on immigration status. DWIs didn't used to be a problem, but now the Department of State can revoke a visa just for the simple charge of a DWI. We're not even talking about conviction. It's something I don't agree with. It is unjust to have a visa revoked just because of a simple charge that hasn't been substantiated yet, but that is the case. And it doesn't happen in every single one, I've noticed. Like some people come to me and I'm saying, I'll say to you, has the embassy sent you an email with your visa revocation yet? No. And maybe they never did. But I have had just as many H1 visa holders who said, yeah, I got charged on Wednesday. On Monday, I got an email from the embassy revoking my visa. I mean, it's unbelievable how fast this can happen. Which just goes to show how fast the government can act if it wants to. But the DWI can affect one's immigration, and in other ways too. Domestic violence conviction is a automatic deportable offense. Shoplifting, depending on the amount stolen, is also a deportable offense. Impact on immigration status. Of course, there are other ways it can impact you as well. It can just affect your employment. Maybe the next place you work, or background check happens, and the choice between someone who has a criminal charge, conviction of any kind, and not, I'll choose the one who doesn't. Some employers, for example, I've noticed in healthcare, or where there is a national security, the security clearances are involved. Even small, lower level crimes can prevent employment. So what happens? I mean, if an H-1B visa holder loses their job, they are out of status. They are out of immigration status. That's what the visa entails. So that's the impact of potential immigration issues. It may not even be a deportable offense, but if the employer fires you because of an offense, and it's their prerogative in most cases to do that, if their policy holds that, then you lose your status that way too. Maybe you don't lose your status now, but maybe future admission says maybe it doesn't affect your status now, but it affects your future application for citizenship. Again, there's a court case that says Padilla versus Kentucky. Have a lawyer, NMW, no matter what. I mentioned domestic violence. SEWA deals with these issues a lot. The immigration intersects in a variety of ways, whether it be an actual charge of domestic violence, but also orders for protection, harassment restraining orders, assault charges, U visas. It actually used to be that one could avoid deportation. Let's just say if the domestic violence charge was changed to just a strict assault charge, not assault on a household member, but just another adult, like a bar fight. That's no longer the case. There was a Supreme Court ruling. Again, another reason why we need to consult the right lawyers. The Supreme Court ruling that changed that definition. That's no longer a way for me to avoid deportation for my clients. It used to be that simple assault by fear, there may not be bodily harm, but it was just a fear of assault. It used to be that that could avoid deportation. There is a recent Supreme Court ruling that is no longer a difference either. So these things change, the law changes. If there is a suspicion that someone has been a victim of a crime, a U visa is a possibility. It's not for any crime, but there's a list of eligible crimes. One thing I wanted to mention, particularly for the SEWA people, it's important to know. U visas are a good option, but they are taking a very, very long time to process these days. However, T visas, trafficking visas, are a good option to consider. And a lot of times when someone is U visa eligible, there can be a potential argument made that it was a trafficking matter as well. So anytime you're thinking of these days, especially, anytime you're thinking about U visas, you should be thinking about T visas at the same time. That's definitely had an impact on my practice with the length of time it's taking for U visas to get to get approved. Question is about asylum. Asylum is it doesn't involve being a victim of a crime in the United States. So asylum is asylum is a whole big can of worms, and it's difficult to get, but that has to happen in your country of origin. But that's a good question.
So what's the difference between a U visa and a T visa?
A U visa is someone who's victim of a certain set of crimes. A T visa is someone who is a victim of human trafficking, which can be the same thing. It's human trafficking can be a subset of a U visa. The question is, what are the components of trafficking? It's similar to U visa, where you were a victim of that particular crime, and then you also assisted the police in some way in the investigation or somehow in catching the wrongdoers. But you can look up the specific components just type in USCIS T visa or USCIS U visa. These are huge issues. These are huge issues that would involve their own seminars. But I just wanted to make sure that to flag those for you, particularly that U visa T visa interaction. Keep always analyze for the T visa along with the domestic issue, and consult a lawyer if you can. Well, are these the question was, are we ready for questions? Give me just a couple more minutes. Civil issues, personal injuries. These are issues where SEWA can also help, at least to refer to the proper attorney, or at least to know that there's something that can be done. Car accidents, medical malpractice. Look, if someone comes here, they are, they've been guided by the H-1B visa. It's a very narrow process. Everything's been handled for them. They come here, they live in their apartment, they go to work every day. That's what they do. But then something happens, like they get rear-ended by their car. What can they do? Or they go to a doctor and the doctor gives them the wrong diagnosis or the wrong medical treatment. What can you do? In the United States, we have a system where you can be made whole, at least monetarily, by by personal injury actions. So it's important to know that something can be done. We have small claims. It's a very easy process. If someone promised you $500 for doing this and then they don't do that, they don't do it, you can take them to a small court. It's not the big trial court, but they have small civil courts, small claims courts where you can go and dispute these. It's more streamlined system. Landlord-tenant is another issue that people come across. I could do a whole hour on landlord-tenant issues and non-citizens. I'm happy to do that sometime. But just make sure you know that the tenant has rights. It doesn't matter if you're a non-citizen or not. You have rights. Business formation. Okay, H-1B visas. No. Every time, every quarter, I get a call. Someone wants to start their own IT consulting because their friend did it. First of all, I don't believe that their friend did it. If their friend did it, it was illegal too. You can be a part of a corporation if you are a passive investor, but that is never the reason why someone wants to start a business. So just my answer is always no. Along with that, every year or so, someone I get a call from an H-1B visa holder who wants to start a grocery store with their friends, and I have a wonderful. I don't even charge because I just feel like I'm doing good for the world when I talk someone out of starting an Indian grocery store. I love our I love our Indian grocery stores, but leave it to the professionals. This is not something to do on the side. The same goes with restaurants. Same goes with restaurants, by the way. Yeah, I don't know. There is no single Indian grocery store started by someone on the side that has ever survived. It is only a burden on your life. You go home. Here's what I tell people. You made it. You're here. You made it. Go home. Kiss your wife. Go to the North Shore. Go to a cabin. Go skiing. Go walking. Enjoy the parks, the lakes. Fly to Disneyland. Do anything other than some of these things that will just bring a curse on your life. Okay, other civil issues, guns. I put this under civil, by the way, because it's not necessarily. I'm not talking about guns in a criminal sense, but I got a call from someone once. They're just enthusiasts. They like to go to a gun range. They like to fire their guns, and they like to. And this was at a time where there was growing violence against Asians, and they also wanted to have some self-protection. And so they called the Department of Natural Resources and said, "Am I eligible to buy a gun?" Because and the Department of Natural Resources said, "Okay, well, are you a resident?" And he said, "Yes, I live in Minnesota." And so the person said, "Well, you can go ahead and buy a gun." So he went and bought a gun. Something I don't know, twitched in the back of his mind or something. And so he called me and I said, "Well, look, you are a resident for the purposes of buying a fishing license, but you're not a resident for the purpose of purchasing a firearm. An H-1B or temporary visa holders are not eligible to purchase or own or possess firearms." So I just want to make sure that is clear. Our gun laws are complicated, so I wanted to make sure to mention that. And by the way, this is not an anti-gun statement. It's just this is the rules. Wait till you're a permanent resident or a citizen. Yes. Okay, frequent comments and questions. I talked about the grocery store. The other question, this is not an H1 issue, but this is like you're almost you're a student and you're on F1, and then you're exercising your optional practical training for that 1 or 3 years. My OPT is going to expire soon, so I'm just going to do job through CPT. OPT and CPT are very you have to be really careful when you're using this. So many people are confidently launching themselves into what is called day one CPT, where you join the college, but they offer I don't know, basically a work learning program. And so they get what is called CPT. So they can do some online classes, but they're allowed to work full time right away.
What does
OPT stands for optional practical training, and then CPT stands for curricular practical training. And they're kind of terms of art, and they have their own rules. What I just want to say is when you, especially for SEWA people, when you come across OPT versus CPT, just be very, very careful. The next thing I want to mention is that I also get some people say, I'm not working, I'm just volunteering. First of all, no. If someone is just volunteering, we know what that means. They're being paid under the table. But just so you know, saying that you volunteer does not qualify one to actually work. So work is work, whether you're being paid or not. So if you're not eligible to work, you're not eligible to just volunteer. H-1B visa fees, just FYI, just want to mention that employer for H-1Bs, employers must pay all fees, attorney and filing fees. And what is happening these days is that companies are finding clever ways to get reimbursed for their attorney's fees from the employee, and that is illegal. You can file a wage complaint. I think, again, you should do that carefully. But you know, I don't tell every single person to go out and file a wage complaint, because sometimes they have delicate issues regarding their status. But it just so you know, that is against the law. Employer letters to the interview, if they really, it's just so you know, just get an attorney to do these things, and your H-1B attorney is supposed to be answering all your questions. It is a dual representation relationship. The attorney represents both the company and the employee. That is the rule. That's the law. Anyway, and then I do want to mention on this, for those of you who don't know, when someone transfers their H-1B to another company, which is perfectly fine, they get a receipt notice. When you have to apply for a new H-1B, and then you get a receipt notice. Now the rule says that technically, even before that new H-1B is approved, you can start working with the new company once you get that receipt notice. And so a lot of people are rushing into the new employment after they just get the receipt notice. The new employer wants you to start working right away because they need to bill their hours to the client, whatever. But what happens if it's not approved? What happens if that new H-1B is not approved? And that does happen for whatever reasons. Well, you're out of luck is the answer. You're out of luck. You have to stop working at that new place, and you resign from the prior employer, so you can't work there either. So you're stuck. Now there are remedies. It's not fatal all the time, but you have to be wary of that starting work before transfer is approved. I always advise people when if they don't have to, start when it's approved, not with the receipt notice. Okay, some of the last points I want to make: whenever you're doing immigration, do everything in writing whenever possible. Email back and forth with HR. Don't just call. A lot of these immigration teams, you know, the company doesn't have the lawyer talk to the client. They have their team to make it look like they're actually immigration lawyers. They're not. They're just an HR person. Do things in writing. Make copies. Get copies of everything. You're entitled to them. You're entitled to your what is called the labor condition application. You're entitled to know how much you're allowed to make. Track receipts. Seek out resources like SEWA. Look, there are many myths and misconceptions on the discussion boards, online discussion boards like we've discussed today. Ask the professionals. And like I mentioned before, legal costs are high after the fact. They're higher after the fact because you're trying to untie a knot. And so that takes more work and time. So that takes more, that costs more. Okay. Questions?
I have a different question. We are filing GC for my mother-in-law. So we filed I-130. We got the receipt. Everything is fine. Then we started another application for I-485. Everything went through fine, but we get a notice from, USCIS, which says that we have paid extra amount. They have returned our check, but we don't have any receipt number, nor have our documents come back, and we don't know whom to contact.
Okay, then for the people online, the question was, what happens if the government returns the fee check because it was apparently too high? You wrote it it was the wrong amount, and but the packet was not returned. So that is that is a unique situation. I've had instances where applications have been returned for improper fee.
Here-
But the entire application was returned along with the check and not just the check itself. So here's what I would suggest is I think we're going to talk about your personal situation a little bit more to answer your question properly. So we should have an offline conversation about the details of what happened, because I have questions to ask to understand your situations better, and it would be better if we do it one-on-one.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want to extend or support my visa or green card process. And but I through pro bono lawyer immigrant law of Minnesota, I have applied for EAD. That got approved and it is active from October 30th. But how do I they have through the immigrant law of Minnesota, I have worked through UVs also, and the Hawaii Department of Police or judge, they didn't support my case, the signatory certificate. So I couldn't. They said they couldn't proceed from that, so I couldn't go for U visa status also.
So the question is, you have an EAD,
but
right?
The visa, just employment authorization.
Okay. You have a EAD but no employment authorization. So excuse me, you have you have employment authorization but no visa status. Okay, so again, I think this is one of those situations where we should talk one-on-one about your specific situation, so I can give you an answer that is tailored to your situation. But look, in general, this does not answer your question. I'm not giving you advice on what to do until I talk with you one-on-one more. But in general, once you have an EAD, that's very good. You can start working on that. But I need to know more about the sequence of when it was approved and under what status it was. You can't just apply for an EAD for no reason. You have to, when you apply for an employment authorization document, it is linked to some other status.
Yeah.
So whether whether yours is, whether it might be an adjustment of status, it might be an asylum, it might be something else. So I would like to learn more about what your situation is. And I don't think we should talk about it within the group. I think we should keep it confidential.
I'm a senior citizen. I'm a citizen of America. I don't have many assets, whatever little I have. My son is the beneficiary. So, and then we have a condo. For that also, I'm just a co-owner. Do I still need a will?
That's a great question. So question is, you're a U.S. citizen, but don't have a lot of assets, but you do have a condo with which you are a co-owner with somebody, with your son and his wife. Is it necessary to have a will?
I have bank account. I mean, they
Yeah.
are in my individual
Yeah.
name, but then my
Yeah.
son is the beneficiary.
So there's a couple questions. Is it necessary to have a will? So by necessary, I think you're asking, is it a good idea for you to have a will? There is no legal requirement for you to have a will. If you die and your assets are there and it is unclear to whom those assets should go, then the court will decide for you. We have a type of court. Remember, I talked about the lower courts. We have conciliation courts. We have what are called courts for wills. They're called probate courts. And so if there is any, if it is unclear where your assets should go, the ownership of any number of assets, bank accounts, condo, whatever, your share, then the court will decide that. So then the question becomes, would it be easier on your family if you just wrote it down instead of the court deciding what your intentions were? So in that sense, and this applies not just to you, but anyone, it's a very good idea to have a will, whether you have a lot of things or not. Simply because if you don't have a will, then what you do have will be decided by a court of where those things should go. And it will be harder to interpret what your intentions were, where it is unclear.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Yeah.
One question. When I have a beneficiary, tomorrow if I die, doesn't, in India, it's the system like that whoever is the beneficiary, everything goes to him.
Okay, so the question is, if you list your beneficiary, isn't that good enough? And the answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes, particularly with property, there's no beneficiary listed with your property. So, so is it obvious that your share of the condo could very well go to your son? I don't know. Is that your only son? Is that your only son?
Yes.
Is that your only child, or are there other beneficiaries? But look, I'm saying this for the benefit of everyone here, that it really depends on your situation, and it is probably just a good idea. It doesn't take much to have a will, to simply write down your intentions on what you want to happen when you die.
If I write down that on a piece of paper, give a copy to my son, and keep one copy with me, will that be okay?
The question is, for the online people, if you write down your intentions on a piece of paper, what your intentions are for your assets, condo or whatever, and then give it to your son, is that good enough? And the answer is probably not. Sometimes it will be good enough because the only thing that you really need is a writing. Okay, I wrote this down, but the reason why we have a will is because it is formatted, it is put down in a way that is recognized by the courts. And that is what we're trying to avoid a big legal fight. So yes, sometimes people write down, if you look at some of the most famous wills in history, they were written down on a piece of paper. I want this famous painting to go to my so-and-so. And so then when the court is looking at it, they say, what is this person's intent? Well, I have this piece of paper that says they want it to go to me. Well, then the family says, well, she was mentally incapacitated when she wrote that, and there are no witnesses to that writing anyway. We don't know who wrote that. I'm going to tell you, this is the essence of probate law, is arguing over what people's intentions were for their possessions. And I can tell you with no uncertainty that the people who you think are a certain way when you are alive will be the absolute absolute opposite once you pass away and there are assets to be divided. So, and this is, look, this is established fact. So the question, so then just do the simple thing and get a will. Just do it. Well, let me ask you something. If you want, the question is, can a notarized letter be enough? Let me ask you, if you're going to the effort of writing down a letter, having it notarized, why don't you just do a will? Because then there will be no problems. Well, so then the question is, how do you do a will? It doesn't have to be long and a fancy process, but it is a legally recognized document. You may pay a few $100s, but it will save your family thousands of dollars in court and attorney's fees fighting over what pittance you meant to leave anyway. By the way, for estates, here's another piece of advice. You don't have to wait until you die to distribute your assets. If there is something of value that you want to go to someone, give it to them while you're alive. That way there's no dispute. And by the way, give it to them when you are of sound mind. Don't wait until you're, on your deathbed and say, here's my necklace, take this. Give it to you while you're of sound mind. Give it to them so when that happens, there is no doubt that of where something intends to go.
Would you please speak about like state Medicaid and a significant medical emergency for seniors, and maybe speaking again, estate planning and the risk for your family member and co-ownership of a property, because they'll take 50% if you're in a nursing home.
Okay, so there's another reason to have some estate planning, and this is a big topic. So I'm just going to say it in a short paragraph. When someone, if someone becomes incapacitated and they rely on some sort of government funding for their health care, nursing home, something, they're paid by a state program, a government program called Medicare. That's not free money. That money will be recovered by the government as much as they can get from your assets. Now, there are exceptions. There are exceptions to what can be recovered. But you can also avoid that by putting some of your assets into not a will, but something that is called a trust. Now, that is a big, complicated situation. That is a complex act to create a trust. You do need a lawyer for that. But when we're talking about Medicaid healthcare spending on someone who is infirm, and then the assets you want to distribute to your children or your heirs or whoever, it can be worth the effort to do that, because we're talking, you can be, the money that you intended to go to your family could be completely wiped out when the government recovers whatever, whatever aid they gave for your healthcare when you were alive. So that's all I want to say to make sure people are flagged by that issue. So I think it's very important to have a will. It's probably even a better idea to have what is called a trust. And you can Google that, but the lawyers will help that. A trust might cost you several $1,000s with an attorney to create, but it will preserve many tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more, from the government taking back what they gave you while you were alive.
Could you also speak to medical power of attorney for seniors giving their kids, and if they have adult children that turn 18, to get that medical power of attorney? I think a lot of people aren't aware.
There's when I talk about, question is about medical power of attorney. When I talk about an estate plan, I'm talking about 3 documents. I'm talking about a will. And this is in the PowerPoint, by the way. I'm talking about a will. In fact, for the video, I'll just go back to where. Yeah, definitely. So let me just say quickly, an estate planning, an estate plan has 3 documents: a will, a power of attorney, and what I've written here, healthcare directive. And what healthcare directive means, what do I want you to do with me, with my healthcare, if I am not unable to tell you? Like, if I'm unconscious, what do I want to be done? So this is also a way of directing what you intend. So I want if there's no way of resuscitating me, I want the doctors to pull the plug on me. My family will not want me to pull the plug on, will not want to pull the plug on me, but I want it. I know they won't want to do that, but I want it done. Or the opposite. I think my family will pull the plug on me the first chance they get. I want all necessary healthcare efforts to be made. Or this is how I want my funeral to go when I die. I want to be cremated. I want to be buried. So a healthcare directive sets these things out so that your wishes are carried out. So an estate plan is all 3 things. You should have all 3 things. You should not pick one or the other. You should have all 3 things. Good question. Is a very good question. If you have a will, what is a power of attorney? Excellent. Well, a power of attorney is a will does not give your spouse or your children access to your bank accounts.
Mm-hmm.
A power of attorney does. A will does not discuss how your mortgage should be paid if you're unconscious. But a power of attorney gives access to the people who you designate to do that. Basically, a power of attorney is to do things when you're incapacitated, not necessarily dead. Sometimes, a lot of times when you're dead too, like for the swimming pool accident that I mentioned, if the woman had the wife had had a power of attorney, she would have been able to access the bank accounts.
Or have joint
By the way,
accounts.
By the way, sometimes banks are difficult about the powers of attorney too. That's why having it in the power of attorney for that state that you live in is important. So like if you have a winter home, if you spend maybe here's a good example for the seniors. A lot of seniors, South Asian seniors, live in different children's households throughout the country. Why not? You spend some time with the son in Minnesota, spend some time with the daughter in Houston, especially in the winter. Good idea. Well, you need to have a will, power of healthcare directive, and a power of attorney for both of those states, in case that and especially if you have assets in different states.
But the medical power of attorney, if you are single and you have multiple children, or even your child has we're not talking you're pulling the plug or not. It could be what surgical procedure, or if the hospital says we're not going to go forward with this and somebody wants it. We're not talking just pull the plug. Or if you have an 18-year-old child, the day they turn 18, you have no say over what happens. So if you are single and you want your parents to at least be able to help somewhat in your hospitalized care, or being able to access and help you with insurance, they can do nothing.
That's a very good point for H-1B visa holders, especially the ones that are not married. Single H-1B visa holder, no healthcare directive, no power of attorney designating family members or friends in India for authorizing them to even communicate with the hospital. It is possible the hospital will deny the communication because of the privacy rules. So, and especially if someone is not related, like you have a roommate, okay, your family is concerned, maybe they'll talk, but your roommate is going to be there at the hospital, saying things, doing things, communicating with people. If the non-relative isn't even designated, they will not communicate with you. So you're, again, even for single people, as much as seniors, and everyone in between, estate planning is very important, especially when you're in a foreign country. Yeah.
So if you have a property and you sell it, and if you bring it here, you will be taxed, right?
It's a good question. It's a big issue. If you sell a property in India and can you bring the proceeds here without being taxed? The answer is often, but not always. And I am not the tax guy to talk to. That's where the CPA is very important. And then well, you may have to pay taxes both places. So that's the question. And then there's also a foreign tax person that an attorney that I can recommend people to. Here's one little tidbit that people should know. When we come through customs, we ask to declare whether we have money over $10,000. People think that the restriction that we are restricted to $10,000. As a result of that declaration, we're restricted to only bringing $10,000, no more. That's not true. You can bring as much money as you want into the United States, and it is not necessarily subject to duty, and it's not taxed. But you do have to declare it. Remember, it doesn't say, it's not prohibiting you from bringing more than 10,000. It's just asking you to declare it. And, people, this is a misnomer. This is a myth. You're going to get in trouble if you don't declare it. But and I have a little story about that in my blog, Immigration QA, but you're not prohibited from it, nor are you necessarily taxed. We are at 2 hours and 20 minutes. So this has been a wonderful discussion. I will be happy to answer the question. Let me just end the recording, and then I will stick around and talk longer. But this is my contact information. If anyone wants to contact me, I want to thank SEWA for having this chai and chat. It's been an excellent discussion. We covered a lot of issues. It's things are very confusing, but I hope it was enlightening and helpful to people here as well as online. Thank you. I don't know how to stop the recording.
I do.
Okay.
Here.
Are you cousin to Puniti-san by any chance?
No.
You look so similar to your tones.
Okay. I hope that's good.
Yeah, no, I think it in a good way.
Is he handsome?
Very handsome.
Okay, good. Then yes.
It's not working, sorry.
Okay, then yes, I am.
So what did you say for me?
Puniti-san. Duryodhan, but he has no qualities of.
So Satwit,